So I believe our farm has to do with traditions, and it's a special farm because we bring people and traditions together here, I believe, and that's something special to see now, because I think a lot of the farms nowadays are all built on how big they can build their operation, how much land can they gain, and and that's not my way of thinking. I think more like, as long as I can make a living, I'm happy, and I get to do what I want to do, and that's use horses on the farm, where I think a lot of other people are just so motivated by the financial end of it. Maybe they lose sight possibly on the real, they lose sight on tradition.
I have so many people come up to me and say, don't quit what you're doing. And I guess that's the reason I keep on fighting with it, is trying to. And to me, it's that pleasure too, putting it all together. Who could believe that you could put a bunch of people together out in the field for one day like that and get the operation moving? We always used to, when we thrashed a great amount, we'd thrash up as high as 200 acres some years. And we'd start on a Friday afternoon, and we'd be hoping we'd be done over the weekend. And you'd go out after dinner on Friday, and everybody was new to the operation. And you'd wonder, how are we ever going to get this thing going? Nothing would be working right. And by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'd be thrashing. It was that easy. It just seemed like after a while, everything just kind of fell into place. And I think it's still the same way today yet. This is the first time we've run this machine. It was just done this spring. The restoration was just completed in June. And we took it to Bicycler's 100th anniversary celebration, and we ran it in there. But we didn't have any bundles to thrash. All you're doing when you're stooking bundles is the binder lays them in rows when it's cutting and tying the grain. And by hand you have to set those rows up so that the weather doesn't affect them, so they're not laying flat on the ground. And you put about 8 bundles in a stook like you stook a deck of cards. Exactly the same thing. And you set all your rows up and let them cure that way. And then if the weather goes bad, it doesn't hurt them anymore either. If you're not using a stook loader, you can set the stooks just about anywhere, and the wagon can swing anywhere when they're pitching to load up a load to pick the stooks up out of the field. But if you're using a stook loader, those rows have to be reasonably straight, because that loader can't swing in and out very fast. And we've always used stook loaders here as much as we could. Being as how there was not much crop last fall, there was no bundles left anywhere. So we decided we'd cut some this fall and do it right here at home. Actually, this machine belonged to what they called the Finn Syndicate at Trochu. That was a group of farmers that combined their operations together, and they all worked together. The land was all in like a community deal, and then eventually they all split up, and they went farming on their own. And this machine was kind of left as a derelict after that. It had been sold and it never got paid for, and they went and brought it home, but it was all wore out by that time. So it sat there for, I don't know, since the 1930s until I got it around, I don't know what year that was, but probably in the 80s sometime. And they wanted somebody to take it and do something with it, so I decided I would restore it. And it took me 25 years, I think, to get that all done. We've done everything, inside, outside. All the sheet metal is new. Inside is all new, all the wood is new. The feeder, when you look at it on the front end, that's all new sheet metal and all new wood, and a lot of the parts we had to make or get repaired. Either you make them or take old parts off of other machines and fix what you can. A lot of, like the sheet metal was all built. And a lot of that was done by hand. We had a sheet metal shop in Calgary that done a lot of the work, and when they could. Some of it they couldn't do. Some of it we had to make drawings for them so that they could make it. All the sides, that's all new. The whole side where you see silver color, that's all new sheet metal. And even underneath, that's all new sheet metal. I sawed those little holes where the brackets are. I could do some of that. But some of the work they had to do too. Where the hand holes are, where you see the plates on the side, I cut those holes. Those are 6-inch holes. But we were able to use hand saws to do that. And we used the old sheets for patterns to know where the holes were supposed to go. I couldn't work on it continually, and you'd take, you know, sheet metal into the sheet metal shop to get built, and it might be 2 months before you get it back. They would do it when they had spare time too. And that's why it took 25 years. I only worked on it periodically. And you can only work on that stuff so long, and then you have to leave it. It just starts to get you down. Your nerves start to get working on you, and so you just have to drop everything and forget about it for a while. And then later you come back and it doesn't feel so bad anymore. The grain elevator on the other side, that I wanted that one because of the weigher that was on it. It was a special built weigher that was not built after 1926. And I liked the way it operated, so I restored it and put it on this machine. The top up on top is new. The auger, that's new. That auger is an odd size up on top there that you see that elevates the grain out into the wagon. That's a 7.5-inch auger. Nobody builds a 7.5-inch auger fighting anymore. I had to get that specially made in Manitoba. There's an outfit in Rosenort that they was rolling fighting for augers, and he rolled that for me. And the tubing, I had to get that made down in Lethbridge. The only shop that could make that was Charlton and Hill and Lethbridge. That was an old feeder off a different machine. It was, the particular make was what I wanted to put on here, and I even made the cylinder wider on this machine. The original cylinder was 36 inches on this machine, and I put a 40 on it, which I had from another old machine. And this machine is a 40-inch by 64 inches, and that means the cylinder width is 40 inches, and the body where the separation is done is 64 inches. It's the biggest machine that the Minneapolis company built. After 28, they never built any more of these. They built smaller machines and a different model. They were designed altogether different. One thing about this machine is the people pitching bundles into it don't have to be so careful how they place the bundles. Where some machines, the bundles have to be exactly one behind the other at the heaviest. This machine, they can pile them up a little bit, and it doesn't bother the separation part of it at all.
That's what I was wondering too, because they didn't seem as neat.
No, they were kind of piling them in there, one on top of the other and everything. And I didn't care because the bundles were nice and dry, and we knew there was nothing coming out of the back going up in the straw pile.
And my dad said you always wanted the heads to go in first.
Head first, correct.
Which didn't always happen.
No, there was the odd one getting in backwards, I noticed yesterday there. I don't think that anybody that was driving the wagons really knew that. To tell the guys pitching that put them in head first. This machine is a lot of times by the old timers is referred to as the Cadillac of thrashing machines. That's why I wanted this one, because I knew it was the last years they built them. Oh yeah, and for the capacity. And I had run Minneapolis machines before, so I knew how they operate. This machine is driven by flat belts. This is the drive belt that drives the whole mechanism. And it's a belt that's 150 feet long if you measure it all the way around. And it's a little bit longer than you would normally use on a machine this size. Generally, they were using 125-foot belts with gasoline tractors, but this belt was designed to be used with a steam engine. And that's the reason that it's 150 feet long. And the reason you've got it that long is to keep the steam engine back away from the machine in case of fire. Well, I like to set in a bit of a crosswind with the steam engine because of sparks from the steam stack. And if it's off just a little bit to the side, it'll miss the straw pile. There's a spark flies out.
And right now,
well, we're dead in line with it right now, but it's going to change again. You watch, now it's starting to go back the other way. Now we're clearing again. So there isn't much we can do about it. We have to put up with what we got. We'll put the screen down here pretty quick on the stack, and the reason for the screen is to keep the sparks from flying out. They're called spark arresters. That tells me how much steam pressure is in the boiler. Right now we're at about 100 130 pounds, not quite, just under 129. If we get up to 142, 143 pounds, the relief valve is going to let go and let some pressure off. But we're okay yet.
So Robin, could you tell me again how much wood this thing takes?
Probably 1.5 tons. And it doesn't matter what kind of wood. A pound of wood and a pound of oak, a pound of oak, a pound of poplar, a pound of whatever, they're all the same amount of heat. It's just their density is different.
Yeah.
So that one weighs more than the other.
So you can use almost anything in there.
For wood, yeah.
Now water is different, isn't it? You have to
We're very particular what we use for water.
explain.
Well, if we got the wrong water in there, for example, our well water here, the boiler will start to prime after a while, and that means the water's going up with the steam, up the stack, and you can't have that. That's dangerous business.
What do you mean the water goes up with the steam?
Well, it goes up with the steam through the dome and right through the engine. And if you get too much water in the cylinder, you can blow the head right off the cylinder. Because the water doesn't give, where steam gives.
This is almost like the old steam locomotives.
They were very particular what water they put in them too. When they pulled up to a water tank, there was a chart at the water tank, and they had bricks of water treatment. And the chart would say you put in so many bricks of this and so many bricks of that for so many gallons of water. And we're using water treatment here, but sparingly. When we get towards the end, we'll probably use more. You have to have a certificate and you have to take a course to be able to run a traction engine. And then you have to put in 100 hours of operation before you get your license. Oh, they're nothing to play around with. No question about it. They're not toys. They can be a faithful servant or they can be certain death. They can be your worst nightmare if things go wrong. So, you know, you have to have the training to run those things.
What can go wrong?
Well, boiler blow up for one thing. That's the worst nightmare that you could possibly have, because if a boiler blows up, somebody's going to get killed. There's no question about it. Or the flywheel could fly apart, I guess. It's not rubbing that hard, is it?
No, it just started. This started here a little while.
You find the shim?
Yeah, we took it out.
Well, you took it out. Well, if it's running against that arm, it's going to make it worse.
Where's that big one? The thick
It's
one.
on the back of that other truck. You gotta shim that to make it run away from that arm.
Yeah, we gotta bring it this way.
I can mechanic, Robin, come on.
Oh, I know you can. That's why you're doing that job. The spare sockets are on there too if you needed them.
Yeah,
You put those two in and then see what happens. Okay, you guys are all right?
We're not sure.
When you're driving with this flat belt, you usually try and drive with a twist in the belt. And the reason for that is if the wind should catch the belt, it won't throw it over so bad. And it also makes the machine run the right direction, because most tractors were designed, they ran clockwise on the belt pulley. And these machines run counterclockwise on their drive pulley. So you had to reverse it too, so when you put a twist in it, that reversed the belt. I don't think we have a twist. We don't have a twist in it. No, you don't. Okay, put a twist in the belt here. Okay, that's the end of the belt. Okay. Like this? Yep. And you don't try to pull it against the pulley like that. You just walk with it. Okay. Okay, you ready? Yeah.
Come on, don't worry. Perfect. Get our blocks.
Okay, are you gonna run it? Yeah, right now. Okay, let me get up there.
back when we were threshing with the diesel tractor or gas tractor, depending on which one we were using, people would come and they would say, "How come you don't have a steam engine on the thrashing machine?" Well, I didn't own one. Quite simple. And I said, "I would like to find one, but I can't find one." Well, as it turned out, I had a guy helping us. His name was Keith Colbert, and he had come from Manitoba. And anyways, he overheard this the one day while we were talking about it with some other people. He said, "I was driving a guy around, and his name was Bob Anderson, and he was running for the legislature in Manitoba. He was campaigning, and he said, we stopped at this guy's place, and his name was Gus Seek, where we stopped. And he said, there was a steam engine sitting in the yard. He said, I wonder whatever happened to that steam engine." And I said, "Well, why don't you find out?" So anyways, yeah, I said, "I will." So anyway, he did. But anyway, Bob Anderson, he said, "Well," he said, he said, "I haven't seen Gus Seek since we were out there at his place campaigning." And he said, he said, "Gus was an NDPer. He wasn't a conservative, but he said he still listened to us. He didn't kick us out of the yard. But he said, I'll find out whatever happened to that steam engine." So he did. He drove up to Beausejour, where the steam engine was at, which is north and east of Winnipeg. And what he found out was that Gus Seek had died, but his wife was still alive, and his widow was living there on the place where the steam engine was, and the steam engine was still sitting in the yard. So he asked her what they were going to do with it. And she said, "Well, we don't know right now." And he said, "Well, would you mind if a couple of fellows come and had a look at it?" And she said, "No, by all means," she said. "If we decided to sell it and they were interested, we'd be interested in talking with them." So anyway, Keith Colbert and I, we got in his truck and we headed for Manitoba one cold December day, about like today. It was about the same time of the year, it's about around the 10th of December. We head for Manitoba. Well, we left here at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were going down the street in Winnipeg. You've heard of the coldest place in Canada, or Portage in Maine? Well, at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's exactly what it looked like, too. There wasn't a soul to be seen anywhere. So anyways, we made it to Dougal that night. And we got up the next morning, and we headed up to Beausejour. And the wind was howling out of the southeast. We had snowsuits on and stuff. And I looked this engine over in the yard there and got introduced to the lady that owned it. And I decided that if it ever came up for sale, I was interested in it. Well, so anyway, as it turned out, about May, I got a phone call, and there was the lady from down there in Manitoba. She said, "If you want to buy that George White steam engine," she said, "it's for sale." So she said, "You better come down if you're interested." So anyways, about the 10th of June, we headed back down there, and we bought the engine and had a truck come out from Winnipeg from Arnold Brothers and pick it up and had it shipped out here. But it took 3 years of work to get it to where it was operational again. And this is the one you saw working this fall. Some of the belts are twisted, some of them are running straight, as you can see. And the reason for that is for the direction of travel. Some of the components of the machine have to run one direction, some components have to run the other direction. So that's why there's straight and there's twisted belts. And of course every belt is made for the size of the work that it has to do on the machine. If it doesn't take that much power, you use a narrower belt or a thinner belt. If it takes a lot more power, so for example, this is the blower drive belt. That takes the most power out of the machine that you're going to need. So it's a fairly heavy, wide belt. The same as the drive belt, it's a fairly heavy belt. Later ones up on top, all they're driving is return tailings off of the machine as it's separating. So it's not really doing that much work. Where something's driving fairly heavy all day long, you may not even use a belt, you'll use a chain. You have to lubricate them a little bit every day, but that's about all.
Speaking of lubrication, is there a lubrication, is there a belt dressing that you put on the belts, or?
We do occasionally if we need it, but we don't like to use it any more than we have to because it makes the belt stick to the pulley. And it can wear your belt after a while, and if you look, you can see there's belt dressing on this belt. See the dark stuff? That's dressing that's been put on. And it will, like as the belt wears, it will pull some of the rubber out of the belt if it gets too sticky. So we like to use it sparingly. For a drive belt, for example, you like to have a heavy belt. The heavier the belt, the better it'll stay on the pulley. And the better it'll grip the pulley too.
Where would you get a belt like that?
It is available. There are still sawmills using flat belting. So yeah, if you lighter belting you can buy here because the round balers use it. But this heavy belting like this, you'd probably have to order that, and it would have to come from a place like Vancouver, where they stock that heavy stuff. It is available, but it is pricey. It sells by the inch, not the foot.
How much do you think this thing cost you?
Probably in the $20,000 to $30,000 range dollars. That doesn't give me anything for my time. And to sell it, I don't know if you'd get your money out of it. It's like all antiques. It's like doing an antique car. You're lucky to get your money back if you sell it. You won't in most cases. It's the pleasure of doing it, I guess. They used to do hundreds of acres with one of these machines in a fall. Probably 1,000. I knew a man that had a machine was a little smaller than this. He farmed over by Airdrie, and he was one of the last people to thrash bundles. And he used to do 1,000 acres a fall. This crop here, this is a pretty heavy crop. I think if you got 30 acres a day done, you'd be doing pretty good on a good day. Well, yeah, these small one-day bees are becoming more popular. People like to go to them, and I don't know what the attraction is. There at one time they kind of died out, and now they seem to be getting to where you don't have trouble getting people to come and bring a team of horses even anymore if they have horses. That just but at one time it was pretty tough to find anybody that was interested. Now all of a sudden we're going to a threshing bee.